Hello students, today I'm going to be teaching you about angle relationships. We just got done with our section on solving equations and inequalities. We're going to see how that works if we transfer that knowledge over to geometry. So in geometry, you have to start with the basics, which is angle types. And this is where we are going to be, that's what we're going to be talking about today, angle relationships. So let's go ahead and get started. In words here. Two angles are vertical if they are opposite angles formed by the intersection of two lines. Vertical angles are congruent or have the same measure. Vertical meaning that they basically point towards each other. So in this case, you could say that 1 and 3, right here, 1 is congruent to 3, and 2 is congruent to 4. Now let me tell you a little bit about the difference between congruent and equal, or congruent and being the same. Congruent basically means the same measure. But since we don't know what the actual values of the angles are, we don't have actual quantities, we don't say that they are equal. So another word that basically means that it's equal, and when you don't use actual quantities, that's when we use the word congruent. And this is the symbol for congruent. It's got the equal sign, but it's got a wavy line on top. That means that they are congruent. They are the same. They have the same measure and everything. You don't know the actual quantity, but they have the same measure. That's the basic concept of congruent. Now vertical angles. 1 and 4 here are vertical, meaning that they are congruent. So whenever you find the actual value of this angle, it's going to be equal to this angle. And 1 and 3 are also vertical angles this way. So when you find the degrees for this angle, it's going to be equal to the degrees of the angle. And you can basically see it. They basically look the same. These two look the same. These two look the same. So these two are going to be equal. And these two are going to be equal. All right, so let's move on. It says here that 1 and 3, angle 1 and 3 are vertical angles. Angle 2 and 4, these two are vertical angles, meaning that they have the same measure. Now let's go to the next definition here. Two angles are adjacent if they share a common vertex, a common side, and do not overlap. Okay, so adjacent basically means next to. Adjacent. Next to. So let's go ahead and analyze this situation here. We have intersecting lines. You got angle 1 here, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4. So let's see which ones share a common vertex. So it seems like all of these share the same vertex here, the point where they cross. Okay, and then say a common side. Well, let's see. Let's take a look at this angle and this angle. They share this common side right here, and they're not overlapping. So that means that angle 1 and 2 are adjacent angles. The same thing with 2 and 3. They're next to each other. Same thing with 3 and 4, and then the same thing with 1 and 4. So you can see it right here, adjacent angle pairs, angle 1 and 2, angle 2 and 3, angle 3 and 4, angle 4 and 1. Now, from now on, as you can see that little symbol is going to stand for angle. Angle. It's just a shorter way of having to write all this whole word when we could just write this little thing meaning angle. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the types of angles. You have acute angles. In acute angles, I'm going to abbreviate angles here. Acute angles, their measure is always less than 90 degrees. Obtuse angles are always greater than 90 degrees. So less than 90 degrees, greater than 90 degrees. And then you have straight angles. Straight angles. And straight angles measure always are equal to 180 degrees. And the one that we're missing here is the one that's actually 90 degrees. Right angles are always equal to 90 degrees. So that's a preliminary thing on the types of angles that we can have and how we classify them. So let's look at example number 1 over here. You can name an angle by its vertex and by its points. So let's get into that right now. Symbols. The symbol for angle is, here it is, the little sign that I just showed you. The symbol for congruent means congruent. So that's the symbol. I'll make it a little bigger so you can see it. It's an equal sign with the little wavy line on top. All right, so how do we name angles? There's 4 ways that we can name angles. Okay? Name the angle shown at the right. So here's our angle there. Then classify it as acute, right, obtuse, or straight. And I just gave you the definition for these 3 right now. Right, straight, obtuse, and what they have to measure. First, this is 1. Use the vertex as the middle letter. The middle letter. And a point from each side. So if you take a look at here, this Y is the actual vertex. And it's right in the middle. As you can see it here. And you could see it right here. Okay, so you could put the vertex always in the middle, and that's the right way. That's how you know that the Y, the center letter, is the vertex of the angle. So you can name this angle either direction. You can name this angle XYZ, angle XYZ, or you can name it ZYX, backwards, ZYX. Another way that you can name it is you can use the vertex only. So you can just say angle Y. So if you got separate angles or like only one angle, then you can just name it by its vertex. Another way, you can use a number to name the angle. Since the angle is less than 90 degrees, it is an acute angle. And you could see because a 90-degree angle would basically be this. And this is a lot less than 90 degrees. Let's move on down. Okay, so that should be enough information for you to be able to figure out the got it problems here. So this is up for you. Let's go to the next page. 591. Example 2. Identify a pair of vertical angles, adjacent angles in the diagram at the right. Justify your response. Okay, so we got here. Since angle 2 and angle 4 are opposite angles, let's take a look. This angle here, this angle here 2, and this angle here 4, they're across from each other. So that means that they are vertical and they will have the same measure. So therefore, those are called vertical angles. Now it says 2 and 4 are opposite angles formed by the intersection of 2 lines. They are called vertical angles. Since 1 and 2 share a common side, these 2 right here, and they share the same vertex, this point right in the center where they cross, and they do not overlap, they are called adjacent angles. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Let's move on to the got it's here. It says here, got it. Refer to the diagram in example 2, which is the one up here. Identify different pairs of vertical and adjacent angles. Well, if you are analyze this thing, you can know which ones are next to each other and which ones are vertical to each other. So let's move on. Okay, so now this is the part where we need to still use our equation knowledge to find out when you are missing any angles or any sides or any measures and things like that. So let's go ahead and solve this example. I think this is the most important one because this is where you're going to use knowledge that you used from equations and inequalities. So let's go ahead and do this. Write and solve an equation, I think you've seen this before, to determine the value of x in the figure. Well, with your new knowledge now, you can understand now that these two angles here are called vertical angles and that they are going to have the same measure. So if this one is 130 degrees, that means that all this has to equal 130 degrees. And there you can make yourself an equation. Same thing with this. If this angle is 50, that means that all this has to equal 50. And that's how we come with the equations here. So what's going to happen here is going to say the angle labeled 2x plus 2, which is this guy right here, and angle labeled 130 degrees are vertical angles. So you have to recognize that now, that this equals this because they are the same. They are congruent. Since vertical angles are congruent, we can set it up like this. 200x plus 2 is equal to 130, and that's how you get your equation. Okay, so now it says that if 2x plus 2 has to equal 130, if we solve for x, here we should be able to come up with this expression equaling to 130 degrees. So here we go. And now this takes you right back to chapter 7 where you were solving equations. So we got addition and multiplication. We have to undo the addition first. So we subtract 2 from both sides. This cancels. Bring down your 2x. Now this becomes 130 minus 2 becomes 128. And now you have your one-step equation here. Now since x is being multiplied by 2, you divide by 2 on both sides. The 2's cancel. You bring down your x, bring down your equal sign, and 128 divided by 2 is 64. That means that your x has to equal 64 degrees in order for all this expression to equal 130. So let's go ahead and check that, see if it's true. So I'm going to put in 64 in for that x right there. 2x plus 2, all that has to equal 130. But now instead of putting x, I'm going to put the 64 that we got. 2 times 64 plus 2 hopefully equals 130. So let's see. 2 times 64, that's 128. Plus 2, let's see if that equals 130. 128 plus 2 is 130. Equals to 130. That is a true statement. Therefore, x is worth 64. So x has to be 64 in order for all this to equal 130 degrees. Now, the value of x equals 64. That is your answer. Now, if you check it, got it, actually wants you to do the other side. They want you to do what I just did, but now they want you to recognize that this equals that. And that's what your got it problem is all about. So basically here it says, write and solve an equation to determine the value of y in the example number 3. So this is example number 3 over here. Right? So now we want to find the value of y. And that's for you to show me. All right? So we're going to stop now for this video, and that should be enough to get you going. Thanks.